construction site can be like an obstacle course. There are hazards everywhere and accidents just waiting to happen. As your employer, we're required to provide a safe workplace, but it's your job to understand safe procedures and use them.
Good, let's have a look around the site. Now, I want to make sure that you know how to spot safety hazards and know what to do about them. Of course, we're not going to be able to cover everything you need to know about safety in one morning, so that's why it's important to ask questions. And don't be afraid to ask them, today or any other day. Here, you always start with this. A lot of things could fall on your head around here, so wear it. Your hard hat's the most important piece of safety equipment you've got. Now, even though you may not think of it as safety equipment, you need to wear the proper clothes for the job. Now, on this construction site, we typically wear the work shirt, boots, and no-cuff pants. The pants should be worn outside the boots so that things like concrete don't fall down inside your boot and burn your skin, okay?
Okay.
You have other personal protective equipment that you wear depending upon the circumstances. Let's start with gloves. Gloves are your best protection against cuts, friction burns, splinters, and blisters. And make sure you're wearing the right kind of gloves for the job. If you're working around concrete, for example, you'll need rubber gloves. Eye and face protection is required when grinding, sawing, chipping concrete, and during other potentially dangerous operations. Ask your supervisor if full face protection is necessary.
Now, if you find yourself working around a place where you have to raise your voice or shout to be heard, you should be wearing ear protection. See, hearing loss happens slowly. You don't even know you're losing it till it's gone. Now, when you're using these earplugs, this is the way you do it. You roll them in your fingers like this. They're small, then lift up your ear and stick the plug in just like that. You got it? All right. Okay, good.
Now, in other circumstances, you may have other personal protective equipment assigned and fitted to you for a particular job. For instance, lanyards, harnesses, lifelines, and respirators. If you're not familiar with this equipment, ask about it. Just remember, if you don't wear your personal protective equipment, it doesn't help you. So use it, top to bottom. Hard hat, eye protection, hearing protection, respirator, harnesses, gloves, work clothes, and boots. They all have a purpose, to keep you safe.
Under federal law, you have the right to know the dangers associated with any hazardous substances, including flammable liquids. Now, when you're using them, remember these three things. Follow the instructions on the label, talk with your supervisor, and get to know the emergency response procedures. If you have any questions, ask your supervisor for the material safety data sheet. There's one for each chemical, tells you what the hazards are and how to work safely with that chemical. And handling hazardous materials requires the use of personal protective equipment, like gloves, eyewear, and sometimes a respirator. And don't take anything for granted. Mishandling can cost you your eyesight, cause severe burns, or even ruin your lungs. And while we're on the subject, remember to store all flammable liquids in these spring-lock containers. Don't use glass or plastic. Glass can break, and chemicals can eat right through the plastic. You got any sparks or flames around, you got a fire. And when a fire starts, you look for one of these real fast. On a construction site, a fire extinguisher is a very important piece of equipment. Make sure you know where they're stored, and make sure you know how to use them. You see this? Now, somebody could trip over this. If you see something like this, pick it up. It's just good housekeeping. And good housekeeping also includes proper storage. Building materials, for instance, should be stored in places where you can get to them easily. And Tim, we don't do this just to keep things looking good. We do it because clutter and sloppy work areas attract accidents. And that's one thing we don't want around here. And we're working with a lot of electrical power here, so be on the defensive. Check out potential problems before they happen. Always inspect electrical equipment and cords before you use them. Now take, for instance, this one right here. You see? It's missing a ground plug and it's tagged, do not use.
Okay, now, am I supposed to tag them like this?
That's right. You see something wrong, you tag it. Say, Deb, would you mind taking this down to the crew shack and getting it repaired?
Sure.
You see, the law requires us to protect you from electrical shock, either by having you use a ground fault circuit interrupter or having an assured grounding program in place. At this site, we use the assured grounding program. The cords are inspected and color-coded at least every 3 months. Now, if you don't see a current code, don't use it. Remember, the codes change every 3 months, so you have to stay up with it. Oh, and another thing, if you're working with an electrical tool and you feel any kind of shock, stop using it and tell your supervisor about it. Oh, and while we're talking about electricity, remember that overhead power lines can be very dangerous. People simply forget to look up and they touch the lines with metal ladders or conductors. The result is serious burns or death. Now, overhead power lines are nothing to fool around with. Falls are one of the leading causes of injury in construction. That's why you need to know what the hazards are.
Unsafe ladder use causes many falls on construction sites. Choose the right ladder for the job. Inspect it carefully and set it up at the proper slope. Before you climb, make sure the ladder's braced on firm, level ground. Always use both hands to climb a ladder. Don't try to carry your tools or leave tools on the top of a stepladder. And don't overreach.
Now, anytime you're going 4 feet or higher off the ground, you may need protection from falling, depending on the circumstances. Now, that could be a harness or netting, or a handrail, maybe your only protection. And by the way, if you see a handrail down, you replace it. Don't just leave it for the next guy.
Okay.
Now, anytime you see an opening that someone could fall into, either replace the cover, barricade it, or immediately notify your supervisor.
Improper lifting is another major source of injury on the job. To do it right, place your feet about shoulder width apart. Bend at the knees to grasp the weight. Keep your back reasonably straight. Get a firm hold and lift up by straightening your legs. Don't twist. When you're putting the load down, reverse this procedure. If the load is heavy or awkward, get help. Trying to lift more than 50 pounds of materials alone can be too much.
Now remember, there's always a right way to do any job, the safe way, whether you're climbing a ladder or lifting a load. And then there are signs and barricades to warn you of specific hazards. Now, this barricade was put here for a reason, to protect you. Never go around a barricade without authorization from your supervisor. Look where you're going and always obey safety signs and signals. And Tim, a lot of accidents happen around excavation sites because of cave-ins. Check with your supervisor before you work in any excavation site over 4 feet deep. And get familiar with emergency procedures. If a person is down, leave him down and go get help fast. Always report any injury to your supervisor immediately, no matter how small. Don't wait. Okay, I know that's a lot of information to cover in one morning. I've just hit on some of the common problems. There's more training available on every subject that we talked about. Just remember this: stay alert and you won't get hurt. And if you have any questions about safety or any suggestions...
I know. Always ask my supervisor.
You got it. Remember, your supervisor's trained in safety procedures, so don't be afraid to ask. All right, let's go to work.
Okay.